The U.S. housing market is currently in a complete fix, and an unsustainable bubble around it could make things crash as severely as happened in 2006. A new study shows that not only is this bubble completely fraudulent, but the Federal Reserve, which has actually created it due to its flawed policies over the past 2 decades, is not able to fix it anymore. The situation has snowballed, and several markets are already entering a crash stage right now. The latest data shared by financial experts and real estate analysts shows that this trend is rapidly spreading to other areas of the country. Today, we're going to share a very important warning about the impending housing bubble burst, so stay tuned until the end of the video and share this message with anyone who may be interested to hear it. Can you believe that home prices today are 100% higher than the long-term 130-year average? That's what Nick Kelly, the CEO of Reventure Consulting, recently reported on his X account. The only other time this happened was in 2006, when the market crashed and the Great Recession issued. From 1890 to the year 2000, U.S. home prices never entered a national bubble, but in the past 2 decades, regulators and the Federal Reserve has put us in this situation twice. The latest data released by Reventure Consulting has sparked strong reaction amongst real estate professionals and the general public. According to the firm, conditions have worsened to the point of no return. Gailey argues that there are only 2 ways to solve the housing affordability crisis: either home prices face a steep nationwide correction, or household incomes must increase substantially to keep up with housing prices, which seems far less likely. In this scenario, higher incomes would translate into higher inflation, as more money would have to enter the system. The executive explained, "This situation is not sustainable. Home prices must crash, or inflation needs to skyrocket out of control, or perhaps some combination thereof. The current bubble is much bigger than the one we've seen before." Gailey and other housing experts argue that this is the most splendid housing bubble of all time. The firm also reported that many metropolitan areas are experiencing double-digit price drops on a month-to-month basis and even year-over-year. The analyst observed that several overvalued markets are in a crash stage, which will likely spread across other areas of the country. "The housing market is very bifurcated," Gailey stressed, "and we actually have many cities that are entering a crash stage right now. This is what the mainstream headlines on the housing market are absolutely ignoring." The analysis shows that in the southern region, the bubble is already bursting. In Florida, Georgia, Tennessee, and Texas, the number of new homes for sale has spiked to nearly 300,000. This is the highest level on record, even higher than the previous bubble peak in August 2006, before the massive crash, Kelly said. Several states that have been building thousands of new homes since 2021 are now seeing a colossal surge in inventory and homes for sale. "We're seeing a major sell-off take place that's now causing prices to go down, and I suspect this could be the start of a very large correction," he added. Texas and Florida have faced a huge influx of out-of-state people during the pandemic, relocating to the 2 states, which resulted in bidding wars and brought prices to unprecedented highs. Now, they are the first markets going down. According to Redfin's latest data, there were 200,997 homes for sale in Florida in the month of October, up 40.1% year-over-year. The number of newly listed homes was 48,945, an increase of 12.5% compared to a year earlier. While the median sale price in Florida was $420,100 in October, 3.1% higher than a year ago, sellers in cities like Tampa and Jacksonville are now announcing massive price cuts in listings. Realtor.com reported that 28.6% of homes in Tampa saw price reductions this year, up 10.9 percentage points compared to 2023. At the same time, in Texas, Sellers have also been slashing prices in cities like Fort Worth, Dallas, and Houston, especially as still high mortgage rates are discouraging buyers and new inventory is flooding the state's market. Texas and Florida, they're feeling it first because they were kind of the most speculative markets, Gailey continued. It's reasonable to expect that this will spread to other parts of the country as well. Gailey argues that home builders and investors rampantly speculated in the housing market over the last 3.5 years. Prices went far above what locals can afford and created a bubble, he said on X. Now that bubble is slowly popping, and it could start to pop pretty fast if a recession is thrown into the mix. Laura Escobar, the president of Lennar Mortgage, responded to the newly released data by saying that the American dream of home ownership is becoming unattainable for increasingly more people. She wrote, "We're on the verge of a vicious cycle. That is not good for America." "Enough is enough," Escobar exclaimed. "My message to every policymaker in D.C. is going to be simple. Stop talking about affordability and start delivering on affordability." However, Charles Marone, the founder and president of Strong Towns and the best-selling author of Escaping the Housing Trap, argues that policymakers not only helped to create the housing bubble, but also allowed investors to speculate the market and have no interest in restoring housing affordability. For decades, the government and the Federal Reserve have provided billions in housing subsidies, down payment assistance, artificially low interest rates, money printing, and endless bank support to rich investors. They've turned the American home into a financial product first and a place of shelter second. The extent of the distortion is unprecedented, Marone wrote. Citing an article published by the Wall Street Journal, Marone explains how the central bank's policies support the creation of bubbles. The article reads, "In the heady days when the American property boom was just getting going for the first time, the truth was already obvious to anyone who knew what to look for. The boom had turned into a bubble and was likely to end very badly." With the U.S. government pumping more and more money into the system, the bubble proceeded to get even worse because no one wanted the music to stop. American developers, home buyers, real estate agents, and even Wall Street banks have all ignored warning signs. Then, developers started to find ways to obscure the amount of debt they were holding with the help of bankers and lawyers. Wealthy buyers who suspected the property markets were overbuilt bought more anyway. American and foreign investors seeking juicy returns flooded developers with funding. Charles Marone highlighted, fraud is generally a key component of a bubble. As mania kicks in, people's concerns over fraud lessen as the perceived risk diminishes. Over time, bad actors crowd out those foolish enough to follow the rules and the market becomes dominated by fraud. This was the case with the 2000 subprime bubble and the 1980s savings and loan bubble. It's the same case now too. The problem is that government regulators and the Fed have been aware of the fraud since the very beginning. In 2016, Philadelphia Fed officials even issued a report titled Owner Occupancy Fraud and Mortgage Performance. In the report in 2016, remember, they explained that occupancy fraud is where someone states that they plan to live in a home when they apply for a mortgage. But in reality, they are investors who have no real intentions of ever moving into the property. This is considered a fraud because homeowners get preferential loan terms backed by the federal government, while investors pay something closer to a market rate. They can also, therefore, pay more for a home than they otherwise would. Officials found that occupancy fraud is, quote, widespread, unquote, constituting 1/3 of the effective investor population. However, regulators have not done anything to prevent this from continuing to occur. Instead, they allowed investors to take on fraudulent loans that were bundled with other loans and sold as mortgage-backed securities, one of the bedrocks of our banking reserve system. Fraudulent loans are also in the government-sponsored market, including at Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, both within bundles of securities and within their own portfolios. The problem is that when rich investors commit occupancy fraud, banks and mortgage lenders are not compensated for the level of risk they're assuming, because those risks are hidden from them. On top of that, investors are far more likely to be highly leveraged and fall into financial distress than regular homeowners. They're also far more likely to strategically default on their loans, to walk away from their repayment commitment when market conditions turn downward. These wealthy investors have been buying up millions of properties in the past decade, but holding them vacant to profit from real estate appreciation. They've also been hurting the rental market by removing a huge portion of affordable renting housing from the market. The report, Billionaire Blowback on Housing, co-authored by the Institute for Policy Studies, revealed that billionaire investors have bought up an unprecedented share of single-family homes, apartment buildings, and mobile home parks to extract more rents from already economically squeezed residents. They're profiling from low-income tenants by increasing rents while neglecting maintenance and repairs, the report said. Analysts observe that wealthy buyers are bidding up land and housing prices, inflaming gentrification, and imposing enormous increases in the cost of housing. All of this is happening under the Fed's nose. Oh, it gets even better. Listen to this. According to the Wall Street Journal, banks wanting to unload their real estate loans to the government may have to confirm whether a property borrower has adequate cash, as well as verify their source of funds. However, private banks and official regulators do not routinely verify the borrower's financial information before originating loans in the millions of dollars that they then sell to the government. Again, you might be asking what exactly regulators and banks do if they aren't doing this. That's a legitimate question, and I don't have an adequate answer except to say that this should surprise nobody who has examined the subprime bubble, the report added. Ironically, when the last subprime crisis occurred back in 2008, Fannie and Freddie, aka the federal government, required that banks completed due diligence on the appraised value of a property. However, the Wall Street Journal notes that banks and regulators have incentives to trust the figures they're sent, rather than pursuing expensive audits or risking losing clients to too much red tape. Simply put, the government allows billionaire investors to control the market, letting them create an artificial housing bubble as they hold on to inventory that would be otherwise sold to U.S. families just to create a shortage of affordable homes and push prices to record levels. And when the bubble bursts, regulators failed to protect banks, mortgage lenders, and the general public. Average American families are the biggest victims of a housing crash, but according to the Fed, they can't do anything about it. In September, Fed Chairman Jerome Powell acknowledged that the housing market has been, in part, frozen, as investors locked in at lower interest rates are not willing to sell their properties, but also facing sell-off waves as small property owners and families slash prices to be able to sell their homes. Powell said, "This is not something that the Fed can really fix." What do you think? Another brazen lie? Look, if you're expecting Washington to help prevent a nationwide housing market crash, you are set for disappointment. We are told to believe that the government would never allow another real estate bubble to burst because the American people invest the majority of their wealth in housing, and letting the market tumble can wipe out much of the population's savings. But do not be mistaken. They're not interested in pursuing strategies that make housing broadly affordable. In fact, they will oppose any policy that actually makes prices go down. The threat of another disastrous crash is more real than ever, and if I were you, I would start preparing for the worst-case scenario right now. How is this serious situation affecting you? We look forward to reading your comments, and thank you very much for watching.